everybody, and welcome to another video in the IELTS Learning Tips video series. Today I want to introduce a former student of mine and say a bit about his journey. I think it's quite helpful to see how other students have made the journey through the IELTS process and onto a successful result in their exam, and then of course onto the main thing, which is the future plan, the job, the university course, or the move to the place that they want to live. So just before I start the slideshow, I just want to remind you that if you want to contact me, I speak to students almost every day about their IELTS and how I can help them with their IELTS. So if you want to do that, there is a little link on this video which will give you my Facebook, and also a link to the website where you can also email me. So if you want to speak to me, all you need to do is just make contact, and then I'll tell you exactly what you have to do. Okay, so let's share this information with you about my student. And I've called it overconfident and underprepared because I think this is a good description of this particular student. He's a doctor. He's now working very successfully in a hospital in London. And when I first met him, he was very confident about his English and also his ability to get a high score in the exam. However, the problem was he didn't do a great deal of study, and he had a strategy that, as you'll see in a second, was not the best strategy to use to get a high score in IELTS. Okay, so Karam was a doctor from Syria. He was living at the time in London. He had very good English because his family at some stage had lived in the UK and he had gone to school in England for a while. So you can imagine that his English was very, very good. He'd then gone back to the Middle East to study medicine and then had returned to the UK after that and wanted to take up a position in the hospital as a doctor, and discovered then that he would have to take the IELTS. So that's because he hadn't completed his education in the UK. He needed a 7.5 overall, and he'd already taken the test once and hadn't got a high score in his well, in fact, none of his scores were particularly high, but especially his reading he'd had a problem with. So he came to me very shortly before his exam, and he wanted help with the reading. Now, when we first met, he stressed that it was only the reading, even though his writing had also got quite a low score. But he was absolutely certain about his speaking and listening, and he reckoned that if he could get a very high score in reading, say 8.5, then if he didn't manage to get a high score in writing, it wouldn't matter because he would get his 7.5 overall. And this is a strategy I think that a lot of students try to follow, which is a little bit risky because you never know what's going to happen on the day. And my feeling is that you should try and make sure that all your scores are more or less at the level that you want. So if you're looking for 7, you really need everything to be around 7, because in the exam, typically some of the scores will drop a little. So if you take a risky strategy, then it may not work out in the end. So as a result, even though when I first spoke to him, I had said I would look at his writing, he didn't bring any because his technique was to just focus on reading. I, as I say, was very skeptical about this, but he was absolutely convinced that this strategy was going to work for him. So he took the test, And unfortunately, he didn't get what he wanted. He didn't get back to me, so I didn't know about this until 2 months later when he called me. And we agreed to meet again. And he told me that his strategy hadn't worked, and therefore he felt that he needed to work not only on his reading, but also on his writing. And he also agreed that it had been a risky strategy. And he actually said that he felt he'd been a little arrogant in his determination that this strategy would be the best one. So we had a conversation and we decided on a new plan for his next test. Okay, so this would focus a lot around the writing, grammar and vocabulary, question analysis, planning and checking, all of the things that you must do if you want to improve your writing. We did work on the reading, and we also worked a little bit on the listening, because I felt that if he could boost all his scores, then his chances of getting the 7.5 were even better. And we even didn't leave the speaking to, we practiced the speaking as well. Because even though he was pretty fluent and he had a good background in speaking English, and it's not always the case that when you get into the exam, you can do this with confidence. And I have found this many, many times with students, that although in the lessons I can hear them speaking very well, as soon as we try to practice the exam, the whole thing changes, and it's as if this is the exam and they're not as fluent. So there is something about the exam that changes even the best speakers. So it's good to practice. And I gave him all the work to do. He did it, and then we met each week. We met face to face because he was in the UK. It's a similar method I use now online. So you do the work, I correct it, and then we meet and we go through everything. So it wasn't long before he was getting 7s and 8s in everything that he was doing, because his language level was very good. And he was much more in control now of his speaking, and he was not using this risky strategy that was doomed to failure, let's say. And the other thing was his confidence level improved a lot, because now he knew from the scores he was getting in the work he was doing that he could easily achieve this goal. And he did. He got 8s and 7.5s, and he got his 7 in writing. So he was well on his way, and he went to get the job and started working at the hospital, and everything was good. Okay, so the other thing was that he knew also that now when he stepped into that job, he wouldn't have any difficulty in the work with the language, because sometimes when people get the score by the skin of their teeth, they find that when they get to their course or get to their job, there's still more English to do, and there's still more of a learning curve. There always will be. But if you get really good scores, far more than you need, then you'll be able to go into that job, into that course far more comfortably. So he was a happy customer. I met him about a year later, just by chance in the street with some of his friends. And he introduced me and said, these were his words, "Don't be arrogant," he told his friends. They were also doctors learning IELTS. Do what your teacher tells you. And then I actually worked with some of them as well. So what's the moral of the story? It had a happy ending, and I am convinced that everybody studying IELTS can have a happy ending if they think about what they're doing. It took more time for Karam than was necessary to get his IELTS sorted, because firstly, he embarked upon a risky strategy, and secondly, he was quite blinded to the fact that this strategy might not work. So there was a certain arrogance. I don't like to call anybody arrogant, but he called himself arrogant. So there was a certain arrogance there. And if you're of that mindset, you need to really think about what you're doing. So the problem is, if you have a risky strategy and if you are quite stubborn about getting the help that you need, you're going to waste a lot of time. And you're also going to waste a lot of money. So the thing is, don't do this. Get the support you need and make sure that the next time you take the test, you're going to be confident enough to get through it and move on. Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into what can happen if you follow a risky strategy and you don't take advice. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.